Woven, a podcast where we weave threads of kōrero that connect us through Hauora, resilience and identity. No mai haere mai and welcome to Woven. My name's Crystal-Jae and this is the very first episode of my podcast. Before we dive in, I want to share a little bit about why I started Woven. This podcast was born through my mahi with Oro Aroha, the kaupapa I've built around Hauora, rongoa Māori and neurodivergent wellbeing. Over the years in my mahi as a practitioner, creative entrepreneur and facilitator, I've seen how powerful honest kōrero can be. One story, one moment of truth, can reach someone exactly where they are and remind them that they're not alone. Woven is my way of bringing those stories together. It's a space for real, grounded, and sometimes very raw kōrero about healing, identity, parenthood, grief, resilience, and the many ways we find our way home to ourselves. Through Oro Aroha, I've learned that healing isn't just clinical or cultural. It's relational. It's about connection, about whakawhanaungatanga. And I wanted this space to hold the same wairua, to weave together lived experience, professional insight, and moments of truth that reflect who we really are beneath the surface. Because this is the first episode, I thought, why don't I start with my own story? Not every detail, of course, and not everything all at once, but some of the threads that have shaped me into who I am today. My hope is that as you listen, you'll find echoes of your own story too, because we all carry stories, and sometimes just knowing we're not alone in them makes all the difference. Part 1. Born into chaos. I was born into a pretty chaotic world. My mama was only 16, still a baby herself really, and she wasn't able to raise me. So I was brought up by my grandparents, my dad's parents, my Pākehā grandparents, and they became my parents in every way. Their home was safe but quiet, the kind of place that smelled like baking and old wood, the TV humming softly in the background, my nana's slippers shuffling along the floor. It was calm, and yet beneath that calm there was a distance. They gave me everything physically I could need, stability, routine, a full plate, but I grew up craving something I couldn't name at the time. What I missed most was emotional connection, words of love, warmth and affection, and guidance on how to feel, or that it was even okay to feel. When I was 4, I went to live with my dad and my stepmum. These would be some of the most painful years of my childhood, a pain that I didn't know how to understand, abuse, both physical and emotional, and experiences that no child should ever have to go through. And when I eventually went back to my grandparents, 4 years later, none of it was ever spoken about. It was as though silence was supposed to erase what had happened to me. I knew growing up I was loved, but I never was told I was loved. We never were the family that said I love you to each other. We always had family around us, aunties, uncles, but I still carried this deep sense of loneliness that I couldn't name. I felt outcasted from my family, the black sheep, you might say. It's strange how you can be surrounded by people and at the same time feel completely unseen. Looking back, I think silence became my first language. It taught me how to read energy instead of words, how to sense moods, how to anticipate what might go wrong, and how to stay small and invisible when I needed to feel safe. That silence shaped me in many ways. It haunted me. Part 2. The survival years. By my late teens, I'd become a mama, and by my early 20s, I was raising 3 children on my own. Because my parents had been absent, I went searching for love and stability in older partners. I thought if I could find someone strong and steady enough, they could give me the security I'd always craved. But instead, I found myself in relationships that were unhealthy, controlling, abusive, and painful. Those years are what I like to call my survival years. From the outside, I looked strong, capable, organised, and even sometimes unstoppable. People used to say, "You're doing so well for someone on your own or someone of your age." But what they didn't see was the exhaustion, the trauma, the pain that came from holding everything together, the way I'd sit on the edge of the bed at night, too tired to cry, but too wired to sleep. I did everything I could in those years to provide for my children, to make sure they never went without food or shelter or love in the ways that only I knew how. But inside, I was carrying so much pain. I tried to bury it with busyness, with new relationships, with escapism. I thought, if I just keep moving, if I keep distracting myself, maybe that pain would quieten down. But trauma has a way of following you. No matter how far you run, it finds you again and again and again until you're ready to face it. Part 3. Breaking points and loss. The years that followed brought more turning points, some of them utterly devastating. I lost the woman who was my world, my nana, my matriarch, my rescuer, and my anchor. She was the one who always showed up, who fed everyone else before herself, and who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I was the one who found her when she died, the morning that she passed. I remember laying there with her cold body, kissing her face one last time, cherishing that moment of that hug with her. In that moment, something inside me broke. Grief has a way of stripping you right down to your bones, and in that grief, I created more distance with the people I loved. I didn't know how to grieve. I only knew how to keep moving, and in that moving, I disconnected myself and everyone around me. I felt completely and utterly alone. At the same time, I was facing the reality of broken relationships and of choices I'd made that hurt people I'd cared about. I'm not naming names because this isn't about blame. But survival sometimes pushes you into choices you'd never make if you felt safe or stable or whole, and those choices can leave a trail of pain behind them. I would later, in years to come, following that, lose my grandfather, facing 2 losses by the time I was 29. Later in life, I'd marry again and try to build something solid, but that relationship ended in betrayal and heartbreak. And by my late 30s, I was in another country, alone, raising 5 children. And it felt like everything had fallen apart at once, all over again, and I had nothing left to give. There were times I turned to escapism, to substances, to nights out that numbed the hurt. There were times I broke down completely, unable to carry the weight anymore. Those were some of my darkest years. But even in the darkness, there was still a flicker of something inside of me, a knowing that I couldn't stay in the darkness forever. For a long time after that, life was about slow repair. There wasn't one big moment of change. It was hundreds of small ones. Learning to breathe again, to make better choices, to show up for my tamariki, even when I was running on empty. I began to understand that healing wouldn't come from someone rescuing me. It had to start with me choosing differently, over and over and over. And somewhere in those years of rebuilding, I also started to look more closely at how I moved through the world, why I felt and processed things so intensely, why my brain worked in patterns that others didn't seem to understand, and that curiosity would eventually lead me to my neurodiversity diagnosis. Part 4. Turning toward healing. By my late 30s became the time when things truly began to shift. Receiving those diagnoses didn't erase the trauma or explain away the past, but it gave me language. It gave me a framework for understanding myself better than I ever had before. It helped me to see the way I experienced the world, the depth, the sensitivity, the overstimulation, the creative surges, It wasn't brokenness, it was wiring. And that realization became a portal, a doorway into creating a life that actually worked for me instead of against me. It meant I could start creating environments that nourished me instead of overwhelming me. It meant I could finally stop blaming myself for not fitting into the world that was never built for me in mind. I still had to face the trauma, to process the grief, the anger, the shame, but now I could do it with self-understanding rather than self-punishment. And that's where everything changed. Slowly I began to rebuild. I found strength in creating sustainable businesses, in trusting my creative energy again, and in becoming a mama who could stand more steadily on her own feet. I reconnected with my whakapapa, with my whānau, with my Māoritanga, and that reconnection has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. That journey back to self, to my tūpuna, to my culture, my own rhythm, that has grounded me more deeply than anything else ever could. Part 5. Where I stand today. There's been recent grief too, though. Just as I was preparing to return home to Aotearoa, my birth mother, the woman I'd only just begun building a connection with, passed away. She died a month before I was due to come home. That loss opened up old wounds and new layers of grief, not only for losing her, but grieving the relationship that we never had the chance to even grow, to get to know, to have a mother and daughter relationship. And yet, even through that pain, I've been drawn closer to my Māoritanga. She's guided me back to my roots, the tūpuna who stand beside me, and now her. Today I stand here as a single mama, a businesswoman, a creator, but most importantly, as someone who finally feels at home in her own skin. I've built businesses from the ground up. I've learned how to nurture my Hauora. I've stopped searching for love in others to fill what I now carry within myself. I'm not healed in every way. Healing is ongoing, but I'm stronger now. I understand myself, and I can shape my life around what supports me rather than what breaks me. And I can finally see my story, not just as one of survival, but of resilience and reclamation. When I look at my children now, at how they speak, how they feel safe to express emotion, how they know they're loved, I see that cycle breaking in real time, and that to me is healing in its truest form. So that's me, or at least some of my story, some of the threads that have shaped me thus far. If any part of my story resonates with you, I hope you feel seen, and I hope you feel less alone. Woven is about weaving together stories of resilience, identity and healing, not just mine, but the voices of many others to come. In episode 2, we'll talk about identity and belonging, and the search for where we fit and what happens when we feel like we don't belong. But until then, kia kaha, kia maia, kia manua nui. Be strong, be brave, be steadfast. I'm Crystal-Jae, and this is Woven.